Hey everybody, this is going to be my breakdown of the 10 game slate today, 10/30 of 2021, and per Fanduel. Obviously, the link of the spreadsheet will be in the description below. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get started in the games. So, the first game we're going to look at is the New York Knicks and the New England Pelicans. As you can see from the Knicks, there's a lot of guys who've kind of got the peak price that they've been. Um, Toppin's been pretty good this season, but he has a very low floor. There's not a whole lot here that I'm really all that excited about, except for maybe Julius Randle, just because he can, get lots of rebounds and stuff. But everybody else is they're just using a deep bench, and it's kind of a mixed bag. So it's hard to know which ones of those guys are going to do well. Walker has been pretty good the last few games, but we can't be for certain that he's gonna, be a 5xer again. Especially in a bit of a lower scoring game than what we might like to run the Knicks against people. So uh, we'll see how that kind of goes. Let's go ahead and get in the Pelicans. Obviously, Jonas Valanciunas has been playing really good, and he's definitely somebody that I'm looking at today, especially with Brandon Ingram being doubtful. Um, that's gonna definitely change some potential if he is out. That will give guys like Valanciunas more minutes, and probably some guys like Herbert Jones more minutes as well, and maybe even get Jackson Hayes in the game here. Um, we'll have to wait and see what the status is of him closer to game time is, though. Obviously, Alexander Walker and Graham are both playing pretty well so far this season, and they're even though they're in a pace down game and a little bit risky when it comes to the matchups that they have. I think Alexander Walker is still a pretty solid position, though he does have a little bit of a low floor. Um, so you just have to watch out for that. Basically for the Pelicans, you just have to keep watch for what happens with Ingram. So now let's go ahead and get down here on the Orlando Magic and the Detroit Pistons game. And so with the Magic, as you can see, we have a lot of guys that are pretty fairly priced, and this is actually a pretty good matchup for a lot of them. It is a pace down game, unfortunately, but there's not going to be a whole lot that's going to be able to stop Mohamed Bamba and Cole Anthony, or sorry, and Wendell Carter today. And so, especially if Grant is out, they could feast. The only risk here might be the fact that they could it's just going to be the lowest scoring game on the slate. I feel like Mohamed Bamba is pretty safe today. However, he's got a pretty high floor, and he's also got a decently high ceiling for a game like this. So, considering the fact that he is, a low scoring game, potentially, he definitely has some upside. You could see a little bit upside with Wagner as well, but really Bamba is probably the most likely guy that I want to look at today. Cole Anthony doesn't look terrible, and neither does Wagner. But you know, let's go ahead and get into the Detroit Pistons. For that, we have uh-oh. Yeah, for that we have Jeremy Grant potentially being out. We're not certain yet. So that's gonna make a difference, and also maybe if Cade Cunningham plays for the first time. There's really not going to be a whole lot we want to use from this team unless Grant is out. Potentially, Olenek could be a better play, and maybe even Stewart. But with these injury risks and this low scoring game, this Pistons team is probably one we're going to want to avoid. If Grant is out, Trey Lyles could be an interesting value play. So let's go ahead and get down here to the Toronto Raptors and Pacers games. So with the Toronto Raptors, obviously, Scotty Barnes and Trent Jr. have been playing really well. A couple other guys that we probably liked the last few days, like Achua and OG Nobly, are probably a little bit overpriced now for what they've done so far this season. So, Scotty Barnes is probably the safest bet on the team, but honestly, it's probably going to be a game that I'm not going to look to go up against too much against the Pacers. As for the Pacers, obviously, Duarte is a good play if Levert is out. If he is in, then I'm probably gonna pass on Duarte. Sabonis has a pretty high floor, but he hasn't 6x yet this season at this price, so it's a little bit risky. Um, and not really much else on this team that I'm a big fan of, especially if Levert comes back today. Drew or Holiday has been okay this season, but this is probably not going to be his best spot. Let's go ahead and get into the Atlanta Hawks and the Philadelphia 76ers. Embiid is questionable, but he is reportedly likely to play for the 76ers. Uh, so, but he does have a bit of a low floor, considering how he's done this season so far. Um, I feel like most of the 76ers are a little bit overpriced today, with Maxey and Curry being very low floors. And Harris's price is a little bit up. Obviously, he does pretty well without Mr. Simmons, but I just feel like they've upped the price on this whole team. So obviously, this is going to be a high-scoring game potentially, but it's still a little bit of a risk to use some of these guys just based on the prices. As for the Atlanta Hawks, obviously Trae Young has got a high floor, but he has not really been meeting his expectations so far this season. So maybe this is his breakout game, but probably gonna pass on him today for the most part, unless he's just unless there's like 9,000 needed in your lineup. Uh, as for Collins, he's been playing really solid today, much better than Capella, and I definitely like Collins today, especially in a you know, high-powered game. If he gets the minutes, he'll definitely 5x. The question is if he'll get the minutes and if Capella can hold off Embiid enough where Collins doesn't have to guard him. Gorgie Deng could be okay, except for he does get limited minutes, so you have to worry about him a little bit. And then everybody else is kind of hit and miss game to game on who actually the best there. So let's go and get into the Jazz and the Bulls. For the Jazz, Gobert's been just gobbling rebounds like crazy, but he's not over 5x or 6x, sorry, this season. So he's got a safe floor, but a little bit not perfect again. For a team going against the Bulls, which are kind of a tough defensive team. Here's a couple guys that we're going to look at for value plays is Jordan Clarkson and Ingles. With with Conley out, this is gonna benefit Ingles the most, and also Clarkson. So those are both guys that we're potentially gonna want to use today. Bogdanovich also looks kind of decent, and then if it is kind of a high-scoring game like I expect, Whiteside could get a pretty good amount of minutes, and so could O'Neal, who will potentially could benefit too from Conley being out. As for the Chicago Bulls, obviously Vucevic's a little bit done under his value normally so far this season, but they do have more scorers on the in this game, in this team than he's used to having on his teams when he was with Atlanta. So that could lead to having him not get quite as many shots as he normally gets. DeRozan is definitely probably the safest bet on this team. It's a little bit of a tough game against the Utah Jazz, though, but he does seem to have a high floor so far this season. I'd probably pass on Caruso in a game like this, even though he has been doing pretty good, because he does have a quite low floor. So, let's go ahead and get into the next games. So we got the Spurs and the Bucks. As for the Spurs, I definitely like Poltel today. He's been really solid this season so far. Look to hope that he can continue that, especially with the Bucks team that's missing a lot of their big guys. Basically, Giannis is probably going to be the starting five. So, it just depends on what you think about Giannis versus Potel, so to speak. But as for the rest of the team on the Spurs, two of these four guys in the bottom half are probably going to 5x, but, which two? White and Vassell have low floors too. So, not a whole lot that you want to look at there potentially. As for the Bucks, Giannis definitely looks like a pretty decent play today if they can stay close. However, the Spurs can sometimes be tough. Connaughton also has a pretty low floor, and most of these guys, their prices have come up because of the injuries. The injuries were known before today, so their prices are a little bit elevated. So you do have to watch a little bit about that. And, obviously there's a risk that the Bucks blow some people out and then everybody gets less minutes. Yeah, so it's hard to really know exactly how to play this game because of all those things. Let's go ahead and get in the Miami Heat and the Grizzlies game. So obviously Jimmy Butler has been pretty decent this season, and so is Tyler Hero, and so is Bam. The only risk with Hero is he has pretty low floor, but he's been playing really well. Butler's been playing really well the last 3 games. If he continues that, then he'll could be a pretty decent play today. Um, this is a tough defensive game both directions, so it's not necessarily the easiest game for these guys, but they are interesting. Not really good on Lowry or any of these other guys unless there's some injury that comes out that we don't know about. Uh, as for the Grizzlies, like Morant's been playing great, but his price is so high, I'm not certain that he's really worth it. Meanwhile, Bane has been really solid, and while he's not going to 6x, he's been really high flooring every single game. A lot of people like Melton. I'm not as big a fan of Melton, but he's been playing pretty good as well. Let's go ahead and get in the Thunder and the Warriors. So the Thunder, I feel like Shea is going to have a pretty decent game. He did pretty good, I think, the last time against the Warriors. But he definitely has the opportunity to get some steals and stuff against Curry, which usually will benefit his stats in a game like this. But there is a blowout risk between these two teams where the Warriors blow out the Thunder. The Thunder have not been good this season so far. Not a whole lot else to really like about this team other than Giddy. If you think Giddy is going to be good, then maybe run with him, but he is a little bit priced now. As for the Warriors, obviously Curry, he's a pretty safe bet, except for the fact he's a blowout risk. And you could say the same for Draymond Green, whose price has kind of come up a little bit, and also Andrew Wiggins, whose price is up a little bit. Poole might be a safer play, if you like the Warriors today. If you think the Thunder can keep it, relatively close. And then if Lee is out, then that will definitely benefit Poole, I think. But not a whole lot else there to like. Let's get into the Nuggets and the T-Wolves. So this is a pace-up game. My favorite play from this game actually is Barton, who has an extremely high floor, and so as you can see, he's 4 out of 5 last 5 games. So he's got a pretty good game possibility. And who I'm very passive about is Monty Morris. Yeah, he's starting, but his price is up, and he's look at this 1 out of 5. Aaron Gordon's an interesting play as well. He could do pretty good. It looks like Jokic is probably fine, so I don't know if he's going to be worth playing, though. As for Timberwolves, there's really not a whole lot to like here against a tough Nuggets team. Though it is a high-scoring game, but Towns can go silent for a while and can be frustrating from that perspective. Edwards is probably the safest bet on the team, but he's not consistent at all. And then obviously Beverly, he's been really good in the first 3 games he's played this season, but he doesn't play a ton of minutes, and so it's hard to know if he's going to be able to keep that up. Let's get in the Cavs and the Suns for last 2 games, or for last 2 teams. As for the Cavs, the only 2 guys I really like are Rubio and Mobley. However, they do have low floors, and they do have risks associated with minutes and things. This team has got about 7 players that play a decent chunk of minutes, and so as you can see, most of the other guys, they kind of trade off who gets those minutes, and obviously with Garland back, Rubio's floor is a little bit lower than what it has been otherwise. But he has been playing really well. But the Suns are a good defensive team, so it's hard to really trust any of those guys too much. If you look at the Suns, everybody's overpriced for what they've done so far this season, with maybe the exception of Ayton, but maybe even Peyton. But overall, I'm probably going to pass on most of these guys because it's not a pace-up game, and it's probably just an ugly game in general. So that's pretty much what I have for this slate today. Plenty of value, plenty of guys to look at, probably a bunch of guys, maybe almost too many guys to choose from when putting your lineup together. So you're going to have to figure out how to differentiate who you might want. But overall, it's a good slate. I'm pretty happy with this slate, and hopefully we can all cash and do well. So if you do have any comments or questions, feel free to leave it down below, and have a nice day.